While the first season of Squid Game might not appear particularly heavy on computer graphics, creating this dystopian hit actually required more special effects than one might imagine. Though the cast and crew didn't have to worry about actual life-threatening situations during the infamous red light, green light game, filming this episode still proved to be quite challenging. In addition to the main cast, there were 300 extras and 20 stunt performers specializing in martial arts on set. The original script called for 1,000 participants, but series creator Hwang Dong-hyuk quickly realized such a scale was unrealistic. Despite 300 people being significantly fewer than the initially planned 1,000, staging the scene remained extremely complex. Since some scenes of violent deaths were filmed in slow motion, it was easy for actors to make mistakes in takes, requiring everything to start over. As Hwang recalled in his Vanity Fair interview, each failed take took 20 to 30 minutes, and we had to reapply the artificial blood. Whenever this happened, Hwang would switch to filming another character's death in a different part of the set, while the team cleaned the actor of prop blood and returned them to position. With such complex set organization, they couldn't afford to waste a single minute. One particular shot from the red light, green light episode proved especially challenging to film. In the moment when Ali grabs Ki-hun to prevent him from falling, the actors found it extremely difficult to maintain their unnatural pose. It was almost physically impossible. Moreover, the safety wire unnaturally lifted Lee Jung-jae's shirt, so the special effects team had to not only remove the wire in post-production, but also adjust Ki-hun's clothing. Otherwise, the presence of the safety equipment would have been too obvious. Many locations in Squid Game were built in reality. The production team created everything from bunk beds to the marbles game arena. Nevertheless, computer graphics were still necessary. VFX specialists used digital technology to increase the scale of the sets. Extensive work with computer graphics was done in post-production to connect various spaces and create locations that couldn't be physically built. For example, the background of the tug-of-war room was digitally modified to make it appear more cave-like than it actually was. The team built real platforms for the tug-of-war game, but the actors were positioned close to the ground, except for certain scenes where characters were pulled over the edge. Similarly, while the production team constructed part of the room with all the staircases, they used computer graphics to expand the space and create the illusion of an endless spiral staircase descending deep underground. The painted background of the red light, green light arena is actually computer graphics, which might seem strange considering it could have been physically created. Why did the VFX team decide to use a blue screen instead of regular sets? The reason is simple. Hwang Dong-hyuk hadn't made his final decision on the design when the sets were being created, so computer graphics provided the flexibility to make changes later. Initially, Hwang wanted to make the arena walls brighter. However, visual effects supervisor Jung Jae-hoon proposed a different concept. As he explained in his interview with the Visual Effects Society, we decided to create a sort of buffer zone for the first episode because if we made everything too colorful and flashy right away, viewers might perceive it as something not serious. Jae-hoon also drew a parallel with The Truman Show, where the artificial world looks almost real but maintains a subtle unnaturalness. Ultimately, Hwang settled on a design that was realistic enough to be believable, yet artificial enough to create a sense of unease in viewers. The game arenas weren't the only sets created with VFX. The environment beyond the games also required digital processing. For example, the famous aerial view of the island at the end of the first episode would look completely different without visual effects. The enormous arena with its retractable roof was actually filmed on a small plot of land with just a couple of warehouses. Everything else was added digitally. Similarly, the scene where cars drive off the ferry and onto the island isn't what it appears to be. As Jung Jae-hoon explained, while viewers think it was filmed on an actual island, it was actually shot at an ordinary location in mainland South Korea. At this inland location, the production team used an existing body of water and then added everything else using computer graphics. And, surprisingly, the entire airport in the season finale is also computer graphics. Initially, they planned to film this scene in a real airport, But due to COVID-19 restrictions, this proved impossible, so everything was shot in a studio and then transformed into an airport using CGI. For Hwang Dong-hyuk, the safety of actors and crew was paramount. So during filming scenes of problematic players' elimination, he took additional precautions in episodes involving weapons. In some cases, even the gunshot sounds weren't real. While Hwang filmed certain death scenes with realistic gunshot sound effects, in other instances, he simply shouted. Every time he did this, Lee Jung-jae and other actors flinched as naturally as if they had heard an actual gunshot. Presumably, anyone in their position would have reacted the same way. The tug-of-war scene in Squid Game was so exhausting that actors had to take breaks between takes. Some rested by leaning on the short yellow railings at the edge of the platform. Lee Jung-jae had a small stool that he would pull up to himself during breaks. Most actors agreed that this episode was the most challenging to film. During work on this scene, the actors were actually competing against a special tug-of-war machine. As Lee Yumi explained in her interview with The Swoon, we were really using all our strength fighting against a machine rather than a group of people. So no matter how hard we tried, winning was impossible. Viewers might find it interesting to learn that most of the glass bridge competition was filmed close to the ground. The set was only 1.5 meters above the floor. This allowed the team to film shots from under the glass bridge and stage the characters' falls. Behind-the-scenes footage shows one of the participants jumping onto where a glass panel should be, but instead there's a platform that was later removed using VFX. The platform would smoothly lower as soon as the actress transferred her weight onto it. After the fall, she would crouch to ensure her body was no longer visible in the frame. Despite the bridge being much lower in reality than in the final version, the actors still managed to create a convincing performance. Unsurprisingly, even such a relatively safe construction scared some of the show's participants. However, not all scenes in Squid Game were filmed at comfortable heights. For several shots from the Glass Bridge series, a separate set was used, positioned approximately 6 meters above the ground. Later, the VFX team combined both locations digitally. Behind-the-scenes footage shows Minyo and Deoksu being lifted on safety harnesses, and the glass expert falling from the bridge. Even while being safely in the editing room, these shots made editor Nam Nayeon dizzy. To convey the full scale and drama of the game, the production team also built a third set specifically for filming the bodies of eliminated participants on the floor. To create the memorable scene of the glass bridge explosion, the Squid Game development team used slow-motion filming with a phantom camera capable of recording at 3,000 frames per second. This meant actors had to be extremely precise in their movements. Turning their heads too early could disrupt the timing. Between takes, one of the crew members would make precise cuts on Jung Ho-yeon's uniform sleeve, creating the illusion of cuts from glass shards. As for the glass itself, everything started with a practical effect. Actors were sprinkled with particles simulating glass shards. They then had to convincingly shake these particles from their hair. Naturally, the main part of the bridge explosion was filmed separately. Initially, the visual effects team tried to shoot this practically, but they weren't satisfied with the result, so they opted to use computer graphics. As supervisor Kang Moon-jun explained in his interview with the Visual Effects Society, many people believe that computer graphics can never be better than practical shots. However, for this episode, CGI proved even more effective than practical effects. This doesn't mean the work was easy. The team had to remove and replace reflections in each piece of glass. One of the most intense episodes of Squid Game was the final confrontation between Ki-hun and Sang-woo. It was filmed in the same location as the red light, green light game, but the set looked substantially different. The lighting was more overcast and the production team used sprinklers to simulate heavy rain. Team members wore raincoats and protected their equipment with waterproof covers. The actors had it much harder. They had to film an intense fight scene while being completely soaked, with severe frost in the air. As Lee Jung-jae recalled in his Entertainment Weekly interview, the filming took place in winter when it was very cold. I remember shooting this scene for about 4 days under artificial rain, which was incredibly challenging, both emotionally and physically. Even some of the most ordinary shots in Squid Game would look completely different without special effects. For example, The ceilings of most arenas were added digitally after filming. In the red arena, the set walls were slightly higher than the blue screen, causing them to cast shadows on the ground that wouldn't make sense in the final, fully edited scene. Therefore, the VFX team had to digitally remove certain shadows. Filming the giant piggy bank containing the prize money proved to be a challenging task. Contrary to expectations, the team created a real piggy bank, but soon encountered a problem. The plexiglass was so reflective that it was practically impossible to see the money inside under the spotlights. As a result, they decided to create a computer-generated version of the piggy bank. All these elements of computer graphics likely went unnoticed by most viewers, which perfectly aligned with the creator's vision for Squid Game. As Kang Moon-jun noted in his interview with the Visual Effects Society, the VFX team and director Hwang aimed to make the computer graphics so seamless that viewers wouldn't even think about their presence in the frame.